Look, good morning, everyone. Firstly, I just want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. It will be focused on mastering service delivery with Smartsheet, and that is partnered with our platinum partners, InfoSpark. So welcome, everyone. Just sharing our legal slides. So everything discussed today is all forward-looking information. If you do need any more info following on the call, we will share it at the end of today's webinar. Cool. All right. So agenda for today. Next up, we're going to have our service delivery insights with the awesome Antonio, followed closely by the live Smartsheet demo in action, and that'll be done by the legendary Lindsay. I'll have some closing remarks by yours truly, and then at the end, we're going to leave a little bit of time for some Q&A. Cool. All right, some housekeeping. So don't be shy, folks. Please feel free to pop something in the chat. Any questions, we've got plenty of the team on board to answer your questions. If you do have a question on the call that you want to get answered live, just pop up your hand in the Q&A box below. Similarly, if you do want a question answered at the end of today's call, just pop that in the Q&A box and the team will action that at the end of today's call. Cool. Let me introduce you to the team. So my name's Richard. I'm an account manager here at Smartsheet in the mid-market segment. We've got the two legends, Antonio and Lindsay, from our award-winning partners, InfoSpark, and they will be your team hosting today's session. So let me just pass you over to Antonio. Over to you, mate.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming along today. Click to the next one, Richard, and I'll start getting through. So yeah, thank you all for joining us. I thought it would be worthwhile starting with a little bit of a definition of, what is professional services service delivery. So professional services, I've got a more robust definition there, but in short, if you're in the professional services industry, you're an organization that delivers specialized expertise and services to your end clients. In general, kind of in short, you're selling people's time is often the measure there. You and your resources, they're not tractors, they're people. It's kind of a good way to summarize it there. It's an industry we find really interesting because it's quite broad. You can see that list there. We've got consultants and architects and lawyers, and an architecture firm is a distinctly different type of organization from a law firm, but the challenges are very similar. So you both deliver expertise, you charge your clients for the time of your expertise and the services you deliver, and sometimes that's based on the actual time or more of a fixed price basis. So it's an industry that's really close to our heart here at InfoSpark because we are a professional services organization. And with that commonality between them is often these common challenges. So you can see some of the statistics I've got up here, which are really, really surprising. And we actually InfoSpark attended a seminar where these were kind of presented to us from an analyst from S&P. You can see they're really strong. I wanted to just kind of touch on them in a little bit more detail. So 61% of employees want better application connectivity. I think that's really important because in this industry, your resources are people, and hiring them and retaining them is really critical. So, that statistic of employees, they just want their life to be a little bit easier at work, and better connectivity between the apps is really important. This second one I want to highlight, it's not a particularly large number, but its impact is significant. So 4.3% of their revenue just disappears every year, which is like a really startling statistic. It's a small number, but when you consider that's coming directly from your revenue, it's quite frightening. And I think what's interesting about that is, where is this kind of revenue leak happening? And we'll explore that concept today. Is it poor invoicing practices? Is it projects going over budget? Is it poor staff and customer retention? Like, what's causing that? And we'll kind of discuss that today and some of the common things that attribute to that revenue leakage. And the last stat there, 59%, that's a huge number of professional services teams report that a challenge for them, or one of the biggest weaknesses, is there's no link between the systems they use to deliver their work and their outcomes and the financial systems used to track them internally, monitor project financial performance, invoice end clients, etc. So this is really common across the board there, and we'll continue on to the next slide, and I'll get into a little bit more detail about the challenges that attribute to these statistics. So you can see here, I'll just kind of talk through them. So low visibility. This is really defined by, and it's a really common problem that I'm sure some of you here will relate to, is, yeah, we know we've got 10 projects coming up, and we also know that, one of our consultants, or Bob, is going on leave in 2 weeks. But often what lacks is, how does that actually come together? What is the impact of that leave on projects? How are these projects being resourced? How does that actually work? And you can see what we're really inspired by and what we do for ourselves and a lot of our clients is we leverage Smartsheet to solve these challenges. So in this instance, Smartsheet's a really excellent tool, and some of you, Smartsheet customers and already doing this. Smartsheet can provide a real-time view of who's doing what, where, and kind of helps alleviate that issue. Second challenge is the reporting. Reporting is typically very manual. It's quite an arduous process. One of the most important things in the professional services industry is, are our projects running on time and are they on budget? And we hear that all the time. That's all anyone wants to know that we work with. And an extra layer to that is you need to know that internally, but also you need to keep your clients informed of how budget and everything's tracking in that regard. So, by using Smartsheet as a central pillar, we can provides a landing area to track budget, project progress, and all of that in a manual way, but also all of the reporting from that can be automated. Smartsheet dashboards and reports can easily surface this information for different stakeholders and in different ways, and provide an aesthetic view of how things are going in that regard. The next one is probably one of the highest impact challenges we see, and it's kind of what you saw in those statistics earlier, that attribution to disconnected applications and things like that. Something we see a lot of is firms in this space double handling a lot of things. A really good example is to estimate a job, whether you're an engineering firm responding to a tender or a legal firm, accounting, anything of that nature. To estimate a job accurately, you often have to kind of plan the whole project. And then that often leads to a lot of double handling. And now that we've planned it just so we can quote it, to actually execute it, we've got to extract some of that information, put it into our delivery system, and really go over that. So what we actually want to show you today is how in Smartsheet that double handling can be completely eliminated, and it's a massive efficiency boost. It helps you get your projects done in a more efficient way, but also helps you get quotes out the door faster, and kind of closes that end-to-end cycle. The next one is kind of a result of that double handling. Often there's unreliable data inside these firms because of that point earlier about disconnected systems, and we saw the statistics about that. The other challenge I really wanted to highlight is timekeeping. It's probably one of the biggest challenges we see in this space. It's really hard to get people to track their time. It's arduous, people don't like doing it. Sometimes there's different apps and things like this used. Smartsheet is a really fantastic consolidator in this space, and we'll also demonstrate that today. You can actually track time in the core Smartsheet platform and some of its premium apps, but Smartsheet can also serve as a connection point where you can consolidate information from a time tracking app or a financial system and surface it in Smartsheet in line with your project, so you know exactly what's going on when. So some of these challenges you're probably already dealing with in Smartsheet already, or doing some of these things in Smartsheet. And what we really want to do today is show you the bigger picture and how it can be all tied together in a seamless way, but also give you some tips on best practices in doing that. If you take us to the next slide, please, Rich. Just wanted to use this slide as an example of the high level and what we're really striving for. You can see here that Smartsheet can enable you to deliver your work all the way from lead intake to invoicing. That's a really important point. A lot of systems might handle your sales and a lot of systems might handle your invoicing, but it doesn't happen in one place. And invoicing and billing is often a key component of that kind of revenue leak. So particularly I want to highlight, you can see it's all within the same kind of box there, that planning and resourcing and execution within Smartsheet can all happen in the same place. And that's really important. And I've actually got a good example of that. So you can see I've got some kind of case studies on the bottom right there, and we're going to talk about them in a little bit more detail later in the call today after Lindsay's demonstration. But I wanted to highlight one in particular. So we worked, and it's just top of mind for myself. We've actually recently completed 2 projects back to back for different architecture firms. One was a large multinational focusing on hotels. Another one was a boutique firm here in Australia. They actually both had the exact same problem, is they wanted to consolidate that time tracking. They didn't have a good way to surface or understand internally or to their clients that percentage of that earned value. And what I mean by that is we've completed 20% of the project, but how much of the percentage of the budget has been burnt, and what's that kind of relationship between each other? And that's often referred to as the earned value. So we were able to provide them, by leveraging Smartsheet as this kind of a central pillar, provide them that information in real time, so they could make better, they could capture kind of project risks early and address them early so that projects didn't overrun on budget. They're also able to be much more transparent with their clients. And you can see here also on this slide, we've listed some of the just core capabilities of Smartsheet that allow these outcomes, which is, faster time to value, higher efficiency in kind of project delivery, and better productivity from your team because they're using less applications and they're more consolidated in what they do. So I've talked about a lot of really good stuff and some really nice concepts. And if Richie, take us to the next slide, I wanted to kind of close that out by introducing Lindsay. He's our CTO, and he's actually going to show you some of the things I've talked about and some of those challenges I've discussed, how they're solved and what that solution would actually look like inside Smartsheet itself.
Thanks, Jones. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Okay, so what I wanted to start with here is what InfoSpark calls our solution overview. So if any of you on the call have worked with us before, you'd be familiar with this. When we build a solution, we understand that there's a lot of change. There's a lot to get your head around with new ways of operating. And so we'd always build a solution overview to give everyone involved a sense of what have I got and how do I get to it and how does it work? And it also makes a good starting point for this discussion to kind of take a tour through our business integrated PPM for service delivery. And it breaks into 2 sections. So there's what you do in managing your portfolio or your company, and then there's what you do when you're managing a project. And so we'll just start with that first, the company level stuff, the portfolio level stuff. So on a couple of slides back, you saw that wide graphic that went all the way from sales to invoicing. That's what the company level stuff's about. Capturing the demand, capturing the opportunities, as well as the projects and the financial processes. And so you can see on my screen here, there's a bunch of different modules that have been built. And this is normally a good starting point for us when we're building a custom solution for someone, but it's very much not a case of, okay, so this is how the solution works, wrap your company around it. It's very much a case of we then use this and then we tailor it around your own specific methodology. So you can see here, we're going to look at intake, we're going to look at some of the portfolio reporting today. And then we move down to the project. So every project will also have a series of, say, control processes or registers. This might be for documents or risks, as well as the kind of the standards in a project space, like the schedule, the budget, dashboards. And so we're going to go through a few of these as well. We're kind of limited on time, so we're going to gloss over some of them, but if you've got any questions, if you'd like to know how a specific module would work or if it can work, anything specific to your own organization, feel free to put a question in and we'll see if we can get to it. So how does it start? It always starts with either an opportunity or a project being entered into Smartsheet. So if you are using a product like Pipedrive or Salesforce to do your sales management, your opportunity management, then that's happening outside of Smartsheet. But when that deal is closed, it's time to bring that project into the Smartsheet. And that will either be done in one of 2 ways. You'll either fill in a form like you can see here, and that will let Smartsheet know about that new project, or you'd have an automated connector in place. And we've done lots of implementations where we'll build that automation. So as soon as a deal is won, it's automatically immediately brought into Smartsheet, so Smartsheet can be aware of that new project. Now, whether you do that with a connector or whether you do it with a form, the end result is your project register will be aware of a new project, and then Smartsheet's automation can kick in, and it can say, all right, we now need to, it will look at the project and it will provision a workspace for that project automatically. And that's one of the, when we're working with customers who are not really satisfied with their existing systems, that's often a really important point for them. They said there has to be a lot less effort involved in delivering a project workspace, and that's where the automation is really helpful. I want to touch on one of those control artifacts that would often be included in a project workspace, a risk register. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but whether it's a document register or an actions list or a risk register or something else, they would typically all be brought in and they would flesh out that project space and be tailored around your own methodology. The reason I wanted to show a system like this is not so much how it works to manage risk, but keep this in mind, because when we get along to looking at the project dashboard, you'll see some of this information surfaced up there. And that's really important, because someone who wants to understand how risk is looking across a project doesn't necessarily want to get into the weeds and open up a sheet like this and have to look at it and then do the same for every project. So we'll come back to this. I suppose we've been doing these projects a long time, and over time we've refined how to get the best value out of Smartsheet for both estimating, winning, and delivering these projects. And what we settled on is the important starting point is to avoid having to build up a spreadsheet for your estimate of high-level tasks and who's going to do it, what do we charge them out at, and then if you win the job, to then have to go and bring all that information over into a new place and duplicate it all and then start again. So when we're working at our costs, I'll just go through how this works. So for a start, you'll have some high-level phases or milestones, and this is obviously tailorable to your own methodology. But then when you start to actually flesh out the individual items that you're going to estimate, the first thing that we ask you to do when you're first in is, well, choose the category of work that this would fit under. So what we with organizations to do is say, rather than when someone's filling in their timesheet and describing how they're spending their time, rather than bringing it back to individual tasks, which can be really difficult, have a standardized and centralized framework of how you want to be able to capture time so that you can get effective management reporting at the end of it. And so that will typically look something like what's on the screen here. Now, this column's called harvest task name because one of the most popular and effective timekeeping systems that like specialized timekeeping systems is Harvest. So got a cool little mobile app. It can detect when you walk away from your computer, so it makes it easy to capture time effectively. And so we'll often build connectors to bring that data into Smartsheet. But it doesn't, I'm not saying that you have to be using Harvest. So you can be using Smartsheet to capture time. You can be using other timekeeping apps. And some customers actually have their own custom-built timekeeping apps. And all of that works still. We can still connect to it and bring that data in. But the key we have found for most organizations is to have that familiar list. If it's familiar, it takes less cognitive load for the person entering their time to find the right task to log their time against. And that means they're more likely to do it. And that means that 4.3% revenue loss that Antonio was talking about is less likely to happen because the actual effort gets logged properly. After that, you need to say, well, who's going to be doing this work? And so I've got here a series of different roles. And why that's important is A, when we're capturing time, we want to be able to make sure that that the right people are spending their time compared to what we'd estimated, but also the billable rate. So behind every project is a rate table that says, in this case, the cost to the business of a project manager is $125. If it's a consultant, it's $175. If it's a lead consultant, it's $225. And likewise, there's a charge out rate as well. And so what you're doing here is all you need to be thinking about is what are they going to be doing? How long are they going to be doing it for? What sort of person is it going to be? What type of work is it? And then Smartsheet will cover the rest. When it comes to, Antonio was talking about the burden of reporting. Our end goal here is reduce that burden as close to zero as possible. So once this data has been entered into Smartsheet, all we need for people to do is enter their time properly, and we're away. We've got end-to-end reporting in an automated fashion from then on. So let's look at the project plan. So when you win a piece of work, then obviously you're going to need more detail than what you put into an estimate. And our project space would have a place for you to do that. And that's the project plan. These are either called plans or schedules, depending on your own internal use of the word. But obviously, this is a really key part of project management. For those of you, I think most of the people on this call are Smartsheet customers already. You understand how that works. So I can skip over this and get to the project dashboard. So the thing about project dashboards is we've never delivered a project dashboard to a customer that look the same as someone else's. We'll start off with something like what you see on the screen here, and then just tailor it to what they actually want. Because every company will have its own preferences for how they want to see the data and priorities for how they manage projects. And so it always will need to be adjusted. But I just wanted to give you all a bit of a sense of what's possible and where we'd start. So you can see here on the left-hand side, we've got a lot of information about the project itself, like detailed information that you might need to reference from time to time. And across the top, nice and clearly, is some really key facts about the project. How far through it are we? How's it going? When's the finish date? And then we move down into the financials. So all that data that you saw me entering in that cost sheet gets combined with the information that we're bringing in from the timekeeping app. And it allows you to look at the two side by side. So we had 134 hours of work budgeted in the project initiation phase. We ended up using 123.8. Apart from people entering their time, no extra work was required to get that onto the screen. There wasn't a monthly process that needed to run. There wasn't a QA that needed to run. It's as soon as someone's time gets entered, when you refresh the dashboard, it's shown up here. And just to kind of illustrate the point, I've taken that same information and just displayed it in different ways. And further in the dashboard, you'll see some other examples of how that can be displayed. But I showed you really briefly that risk register. And here's how that information can be displayed on a dashboard. So you don't necessarily want to see all of the individual risks, but you do want to understand, do we have high risk? Is it all being managed? And so being able to see this summary of, okay, what are the risks based on their rating? Which of them haven't actually been looked at or being managed yet? What other issues and how's the rest of the project schedule looking in terms of task health? You've got this like really easy to look at snapshot of how the project's going. Further down, just to give you some more ideas of how that data can be presented. Obviously, you saw me selecting the time tracking category for each part of work. And here's how that information then gets displayed on the dashboard. So we can say per category of work, how much time had we estimated? How much time did we end up spending? So we can say, oh, look, our stakeholder identification, we went over the hours a little bit, but for our work plan development, we only used half of our estimate. And so this is really handy when you do your towards the end of the process and the project's completed and you're doing your lessons learned, you can come back here. You're not asking anyone to produce a report. You're just coming back to the dashboard and looking at, well, how effective was our estimation? Yeah, it looks like there's some things that we overestimated. And then there's that same information displayed just in a table format, just to illustrate the point that it can be visualized in whichever way works best for you. One of the most popular things that after an internal dashboard's been built, a lot of customers will say, hey, this is great. I want something like this for my customer. And so you'd have something like this produced, which takes just the high level elements of the project plan and displays that so that a customer can come in and just get a sense of how their project's going. And then finally, for those of you who haven't used a dashboard at all, then I thought it'd be helpful to just show you can just take that sheet information, put it into a report and embed that into a dashboard so you can get some of the detailed information as well. All right, so that's all cool for a project, but what about how the company's own whole portfolio is going? And that's the last thing that I want to show today. So this is not looking at providing any detailed information for any project. It's now just summarizing all of the projects together. And when you're doing that, you're actually looking at different data entirely. It's not just about bubbling up what was in the project dashboard. So here you're wanting to look at, all right, what's my project manager workload? And so I can say, look, this project manager has some high budget projects. This project manager is working on smaller budget projects. How many projects are they actually working on? What is the type of project? What's the health of these projects? So it allows you to, what we aim for is within a couple of minutes, you should be able to look at this dashboard and just get a sense of what do I need to be focusing my time on as a, say, project delivery executive. And further down the bottom here, you can see some of that detailed information that you might need to include in further executive reports. There's key statistics, how are we going against budget, how far through the project are we, that kind of thing. All right, so that was everything that I wanted to cover today, and I hope you found that useful. I'll hand back to you, Antonio, to talk about the impacts of these sorts of solutions.
Thanks, Lindsay. That was good. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing it kind of for real. I'm a very visual learner. I always like seeing it actually come together. What I wanted to touch on, Rich, if you get the deck back up, is just some of the actual impacts we've seen with real customers. I think that's always valuable. You know, what we hear from a lot of our existing Smartsheet customers is we don't know what we don't know, and hearing what other organizations have been able to achieve and how they've used Smartsheet, we've had a lot of positive feedback on. So I just wanted to kind of touch on a couple of things and show, to close the kind of loop, show the things that Lindsay showed on the screen today, what impacts those have actually had inside real organizations. So the first one I want to talk about is actually a really impressive statistic. We worked with an engineering firm and we basically created very similar to what you saw on the screen today. For them, it was just about having that time tracking and that project management all in one place, you know, having that visibility. It was a real visibility focused thing, eliminating silos between teams and departments. Simply those engineers and consultants within that organization being able to come to Smartsheet, open something up and see exactly what they had to do that day led to massive efficiency benefits. It also led to less kind of internal meetings and things like that. So for this firm, they were actually able to take on 50% more projects with no additional headcount. And you can see how that's an amazing statistic, particularly in this industry. As I mentioned earlier, getting resources and getting people is really challenging. So being able to grow without having to increase that headcount was a really impressive result for them, and really happy with the outcomes they received. Next one is an interesting one. So we worked with a business improvement consultancy. They very much had the issue that Lindsay showed earlier of having to manually generate their estimates to kind of build out a whole project plan, because they do consultancy, so they had to plan, you know, who's going to be in what place when and what kind of sessions are we running, and all of that's quite detailed. So they had to do so much planning just to quote, and then when they would win the job, they would have to replicate all of that work kind of triage it and put it into their project delivery system to then actually execute the work. So it was really time consuming for them. And it was very disjointed. It created a big disjointedness between their business development team and their actual project deliveries team. With this firm, they were able to actually reallocate 2 FTEs who were dedicated to kind of managing that process into more valuable work, because everything was in Smartsheet. It was all consolidated within Smartsheet. There was a really nice seamless flow from business development right into project execution and also to project invoicing, which is really important. The other thing that they really commented on, just increased staff satisfaction. It was a very arduous job, and it was just something that no one really liked to do, of transposing the estimate into a project plan. So they had a lot of positive feedback for us on how much more staff enjoyed using the new system, and the new system for them was Smartsheet. The last one is an interesting one. It's a pretty common use case, and it's all about reporting. You know, all those dashboards and reports Lindsay showed, as you could see, they can be transposed in different ways. They can be really powerful visual indicator. We worked with an accounting firm that had a very stringent kind of partner team. They had a monthly meeting, and they wanted to have a kind of a state of the union. Every month they wanted full statistics on how the firm's going, what projects are going, how the finance is tracking. You know, they're accountants, so they wanted to do good financial analysis. This was a really arduous task. There was a lot of collating of information from disjointed systems, and it generally fell on like one reasonably senior person's shoulders every month, and it was just an arduous task trying to create that consolidation. With Smartsheet, we're able to automate all that. Again, because everything was in Smartsheet, it was easy for us to surface the reporting in a way that executive leadership team wanted. And it was actually real time, so they didn't have to have a monthly meeting. They could actually look at it whenever they did. They, of course, still did have their monthly meeting. But really, the value here was because that data was always accurate, because it was automated, there was no human error. It alleviated, pressures on internal staff to consolidate that information. And because the data was stronger and it was a much more presented in a much more engaging visual way, we can see that they were able to make strategic decisions in reaction to that information faster. So there was a kind of real increase in time to value, and some strategic benefits for that particular firm. So the important thing here is all of these outcomes were achieved just by using the things Lindsay showed on the screen earlier. So, we see that Smartsheet as a platform is very powerful. You understand your business well and your needs and what you need from service delivery. Smartsheet can deliver on it, and by collaborating with us and implementing Smartsheet right, all of these things are very achievable, and they're not even particularly complex. This is very bread and butter for us, and we've done a lot in this space. So that's just kind of closing the loop on that. And I hope you can see, you've seen the challenges, you've seen it working, and you've seen the impacts it can have. So I'll thank you all for listening to me. I've talked a lot today, and I'll hand it back to you, Rich.
Thank you, Tones. That was awesome. Thanks again, Lindsay, as well. That was a great demonstration. Couple of things just before we answer some of your questions, folks. If you are interested in learning more about some of these solutions we presented today, please do scan the QR code on the screen, or similarly, you can reach out directly to myself or any of your Smartsheet account managers, or even directly through to the InfoSpark team. A couple of more things. We do have the Smartsheet Summit in Sydney next week. So if you haven't registered, that is next Thursday. We will send out some more registration links for that. And we do have another one the following week in Melbourne on the Tuesday. So we will send some links to that as well. And pretty much that is it. I'm going to move on to some of the questions. We've got a couple that have come in. So just bear with me while I read these out. Okay, we've one here. The biggest issue we have in our team is getting the invoices out the door. Is that able to be automated with Smartsheet? So anyone from the InfoSpark team want to take that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that's something we weren't able to show in the demonstration today because it's quite unique to each client, but it's totally possible. So we can, as Lindsay kind of mentioned, we can create, if you're using an independent financial system or accounting system, for small businesses, they often use Xero or QuickBooks or something like that. And for larger organizations, it might be your ERP or Rake or something a bit more robust. We can actually connect that kind of budget tracking and that time burn down to your you've reached 40% project progress, invoice to be created as well. So there's some really good synergies that can happen there.
Awesome. And just two more here, folks. Thanks for the awesome demo. Can the data stored within the services part of Smartsheet be shared with my BI team?
Oh, yeah, really good question. If you guys don't know already, Smartsheet can be used out of the box. Doesn't cost you any extra as long as you have a business plan or above. You can point Tableau or Power BI, generally the most popular BI products, to Smartsheet and actually use some of that kind of consolidated time information as a data source. So that's something we can help with. Your internal BI team should be more than capable of doing so. It's pretty easy to set up.
Awesome, awesome. And just last one here, Tones. My company uses Toggle for time tracking. Is that able to be used in Smartsheet?
Yeah. We kind of just covered Harvest today because it's actually what we use internally, and we've had a lot of success with it. But we've also connected to a lot of other time tracking apps. I think that's the beauty of Smartsheet in many respects, is there's a lot of options to connect Smartsheet and other applications. There's some products we've been, as I mentioned earlier, like a Power BI connector you get completely for free. There's some add-ons to Smartsheet like Data Shuttle and Bridge, which can connect data from other apps. And also if you use something quite bespoke or different, we can also correct directly against the API. So that's actually one of the key things I kind of mentioned earlier. Smartsheet can serve as a really powerful board to connect and also count to other apps as well. So, common thing with time tracking is you might be creating your projects in Smartsheet. Smartsheet could then automatically create the project in the time tracking app, and then the data from that time tracking app we could sync back in. We've done that a lot.
That's awesome, Toms. That's all the questions we have today, folks. So just to reiterate, we are going to send through the recording to all the attendees, and for those that couldn't make it, but do feel free to reach out. We're always happy to jump on a call. InfoSpark are always happy to meet with customers. But again, thank you all for coming. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.